There are some things in life we simply can't explain. Like this, or this, and especially this. But one thing I've been consistently unable to explain to normal people is why I like being chased, hunted, and otherwise scared out of my mind by these things. Because despite the fact that they quite frequently make life as pant-wettingly terrifying as possible for us and our characters, those of us of a certain twisted nature can't help but get all gooey inside whenever a horror game manages to crawl under our skin and tear itself out xenomorph-style from our pounding chests. Sometimes it's just a lot of fun to be scared, knowing that we can turn the game off and all those unpleasant jump scares will be gone forever. Here's 5 times horror games scared the living daylights out of us, and we loved it. The original Dead Space might be my favourite horror game of all time, and while its sequel wasn't quite the nerve-shredding, bleak sci-fi horror of the first game, Dead Space 2 delivered one of the scariest levels in any game since, following the misadventures of the serially unlucky engineer Isaac Clarke after his narrow escape from the necromorph-infested USG Ishimura. Dead Space 2 picks up the story a few years later on a massive space station based on Saturn's moon Titan. As always, things almost immediately go catastrophically wrong, and Isaac once again has to fight his way out of an even bigger necromorph outbreak than last time. It's a solid horror game all round, but where it really smacks you across the face with its unique brand of psychological warfare is in Chapter 10, Deja Vu. Up until this point in Dead Space 2, we've grown used to Titan Station. It's bigger, brighter, and it's almost pleasant to be on in comparison to the dark, tight, claustrophobic corridors of the Ishimura in Dead Space 1. So, you can imagine my horror, as in order to reattach one half of the space station to the other after it's cut in half by a sun-powered laser beam, Isaac is forced to return to where it all began. This chapter is a masterclass in horror level design, forcing us as the players to retrace our steps through the Ishimura, revisiting coldly whitewashed rooms hiding the horrors that took place there. The atmosphere alone is crushing, and the real kicker is how nervous Isaac becomes the moment he steps onto the ship, mirroring exactly how we feel as players, just waiting for that jump scare to burst out of a vent and try to kill us. But that's the genius of it. There is no big jump scare. There isn't even so much as an enemy to attack you in the first 10 to 15 minutes that you're re-exploring the Ishimura, but it doesn't need one, as our imaginations and 20 odd hours or so of muscle memory kick in to scare the crap out of us all over again, years after we finally thought we'd escaped. Bravo, Dead Space 2, bravo. There's a lot of stuff in Little Nightmares 2 that we could feasibly have put on this list. Six and Mono put up with a lot of creepy stuff on their journey through the decimated world of Little Nightmares, from a sack-headed man with a shotgun to a teacher who desperately needs a chiropractor, but in the end, it's the mannequin room that gets the nod from us. Before we go any further, I should state that I have a morbid fear of puppets, porcelain dolls, and anything that looks like it sort of could be human, but isn't. So maybe that's why this particular part of the hospital level had such a sweat-inducing, heart-pounding impact on me. The mannequins are slowly but surely introduced across the entire hospital level, kept as patients of the grotesque doctor, who tries to keep them alive, for lack of a better word, by running a bizarre body part pick and mix out of his surgery. Thankfully, they don't like light, so they'll stop moving as long as you're shining your torch directly at them. Well, that's great, except they're everywhere, and it's always dark. The crack as they come alive and the shuffling of their feet is more than enough to send me into a spiral, manically swiveling your flashlight in every direction as you're slowly but inevitably surrounded by faceless mannequins out to pull you into their unnatural embrace, incites a level of fear in me that few horror games have managed to replicate. It's not bloody, it's not a jump scare, it's not a cheap shot from the corner of a dark room. It's prickly hot, impossible to avoid tension that ramps up from your very first encounter with one of these mannequins to a final gauntlet run straight out of my uncanny valley nightmares. Resident Evil might have occasionally swerved away from its survival horror roots, and Village wasn't exactly the most scare-focused entry in the series. We fight a giant metal monster in an improvised mech, for God's sake. But in House Benevenito, Village manages to force more scares down our throats than lesser horror games do in an entire playthrough. Angie the Talking Doll is horrific enough, we've already covered my hatred for dolls, and I'd like to wish a lifetime of stubbed toes on the people who designed Angie's boss fight, but it's actually the encounter before your date with Angie that makes this list. Not only does the living puppet steal Ethan's guns, but we also come face to face with probably the grossest thing I've ever seen in my 28 years on this earth. A giant monstrous baby, even deadlier than Lady Dimitrescu, flops down the dark hallway towards you, calling for Dada. You can almost hear it before you see it, the squelching and thumping of its footsteps, and the disturbingly realistic, if demonic, baby cries will haunt my dreams for the rest of my days. This grotesque representation of Ethan's daughter Rose can quite happily one-shot her sweet papa, eating him al dente, feet first, in probably the most disgusting death scene in Resi history. Ugh. Let's just say I'm not going to be eating spaghetti anytime soon. As the baby smushes itself against the closing elevator doors and calls for its dada not to leave it, I feel no remorse. That thing needs to stay in the dark where it belongs. But we kinda love it really. I'm just going to come right out and say it, The Last of Us isn't really a scary game. Sure, it has all the elements a good survival horror should have. A focus on resourcefulness to survive, brutal enemies capable of one-shotting the unwary, occasional moments of levity enhanced by almost constant infected-based tension, and a story that has stuck with me throughout my entire adult life. But just because it has zombies, or mushroom zombies anyway, doesn't make it all that scary. Except that's not entirely true, because there's one section of The Last of Us that still, after probably more than 20 playthroughs, still has me dry-mouthed, holding my breath, desperately trying to get through it as quickly as possible. And that is the hotel basement. It's spore-filled, it's dark, it's danky, and I do not want to be here. Arriving via a fall down a lift shaft, you have to work out how to get Joel back to Ellie through this absolute hellscape of a basement. The kicker is that this area is actually a safe space when you arrive. Aside from your own imagination, there's nothing out to get you. At least initially. The stalkers only actually come out to play once you've grabbed the keycard from the security room, letting the ambient noise of a slowly collapsing hotel basement and the clanks of machinery and scuttling of feet on metal do the work of getting into your head. And just when you think you're safe, the game hits you with one of The Last of Us's only true jump scares, as a stalker legs it past the open door you just came through as you turn around. Having played hide and seek with the stalkers, and got your heart rate back to a normal level, you quickly find that the only way out requires power. Helpfully, the door has been jerry-rigged up to a generator by some other hapless survivor before you. By this point in the game, you've come across enough of these to know the drill and pull the cord to get the generator going again. The problem is that in the confines of a hotel basement, a generator is pretty damn loud, and what was once a relatively safe space becomes absolutely swarming with infected, including a bloater. You know, just in case you weren't bricking it already. The thing is, it's almost worse that I know exactly when the jump scares are coming. I know that the moment I pull that cord, the screams of the infected are gonna rip through the screen, and I'm gonna have to make a mad dash for the door unless I want a huge fight that I do not have the resources to win. It's a level of control I do not want, because eventually I'm gonna have to rip off the band-aid and invite hell itself into the basement to get away. Even after all this time, it's the part of The Last of Us I love to hate the most. We've had jump scares, we've had nerve-shredding tension, we've had bloodbaths, and we've had uncanny valley night terrors. But this last scare is on a more cerebral level. It's one thing to make people afraid with blood and jump scares, but what about an extra dose of existential crisis to go with your sci-fi survival horror? Made by the same twisted minds behind the Amnesia series, SOMA throws us into the shoes of Simon Jarrett, who, after an experimental brain scan, wakes up nearly a century into the future on a decaying underwater research station, surrounded by tentacled monstrosities and creepy cyborgs. As Mondays go, it's not a great one. Beware massive spoilers for SOMA here, but if you haven't played it 7 years after it came out, you really should. To cut a great story short, Simon inhabits a number of robotic bodies across the game. His brain scan passed through a series of useful mechs as he explores the station. Simon eventually makes it all the way to the Ark, a kind of black box of humanity which holds a virtual world and the brain scans of numerous employees of the research centre just before it's sent into space to escape our dying world. With the help of Catherine, a computerised ally encountered on your underwater escapade, we both copy our brain scans into the Ark just as it launches into space. It's a success, but you as the player are left on this slowly sinking station, and a creeping dread starts to swell up. Catherine explains that it was your copies that were sent onto the Ark instead of you. Essentially, you lost the coin toss, remaining behind while your copy is sent to live an immortal life among the stars. And your version of Simon is left to die helpless and alone in the darkness of the abyss. If you want to be scared out of your mind by a game, a healthy dose of "oh my god, what's the point of it all" existentialism is a great way to do it. A post-credits scene does dampen the blow a little, as the version of Simon copied to the Ark awakes and reunites with Catherine in a world untouched by the comet that devastated the real Earth. But the gut punch has already landed by that point. Nothing scares us more than having to confront our own humanity. That got a bit heavy, didn't it? Who wants more blood and guts? So there you have it, 5 times video games scared the life out of us, and we loved it. Let us know which games made you sleep with the lights on down in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe to see more spooky content like this. And remember, the jump scares can't hurt you.